So thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. I'm from Northeastern Pennsylvania, and I want you to know that I'm actually doing this webinar from Chicago. So I'm excited to be in the same state as you. I will get into a little bit about my background as we go through this PowerPoint. And so please, again, I have the chat open. I want this to be really informal. If I say something and you want a response or you have a question or there's any ahas, please use that chat. I will do my best to keep an eye on it, but I can see it. So I want to go over just really the goals of the 3 series. My understanding is that you want strategies to fight hunger. So this presentation, we have an hour and a half, and I'm going to give a high level overview. Pretty much it's my keynote that I do on stage, but we have 3 pillars within food dignity. And we're going to go through them because there's so many strategies that you can adapt within each pillar. There is a pre-survey. So if we can put that link in now, it's just 3 simple questions. I would love for you to go to the chat box, go to that survey, answer the questions as we're on this slide. And I have the questions on the next slide. There will be a post survey at the end of this. Both of these surveys are really important. You're going to learn that I love to ask questions. My philosophy when I'm on the ground feeding. So just so you know, I've ran a food pantry for the past 13 years. During COVID alone, or since the onset of COVID, we served 4 million meals. So I have boots on the ground. I've been fighting hunger. I don't do it behind a desk. And all the lessons I've learned are going to be brought into this presentation. But anyways, so if you could do the pre-survey now, we will do a post-survey. At the end of this, that information is extremely important because I want to be able to see what you want to learn in case I missed anything in this presentation. Obviously, I'm not going to see what you expect to get out of this, but I can bring that into the second series. The post survey will then also have some really good information that you'll be able to rank priorities in your community college, because my understanding is there's 48 community colleges across the state, and there's diversity within the community colleges. So we might talk about barriers and you might think this doesn't impact me, but it's definitely going to be impacting other people. So I need you to rank what's important. And then if I miss something, if there's something that you really want to know more about, you can add that into the post survey. And then I want to know what your biggest takeaway is at the end of this. So please keep that in mind. And I want to lean into something really heavy right now. A lot of times, especially when I first started speaking, people would say to me, Clancy, I can't just go start a food pantry. Clancy, I can't just do X, Y, and Z. I can't start a movement. I can't do this. And sometimes the biggest takeaway that you have, the biggest aha when I'm speaking, is going to be where you can make the biggest impact. And it could be something really small, but over time, you will be able to create change, culture shift, system and policy change at your community college. And then by the end of this, so I want to create with you, based off of the information that you give me and the feedback and the conversations that we have throughout this, we're going to create a strategic roadmap that by the end of this series. And so that's really important that's why it's really important for you to give me your feedback on this. The third class that we're doing will be June 21st at 10 a.m. That is really a time for you to come and ask questions. By that point, I'm hoping you have some strategies that you want to implement, but you have specific questions that you need answered to help implement those strategies. You might even you might start collaborating with someone completely new. Maybe it's your local food bank. Maybe it is another grassroots effort in your area. We're going to talk about stakeholder mapping and community collaboration today. I want you to think about who those people are that you can communicate with or who you can collaborate with, and you're welcome to invite them and ask your question. What I will like to have is an idea of who's coming to that meeting and your question if you're bringing someone. If this is a high demand class, then I'm going to open up the class. I will open up more times where we can make sure that we're meeting everyone. So hopefully you did the survey, the pre-survey. Here is the what do they call them? QR codes if you need that, but the links are in the chat. So basically what we're asking is about stigma. What do you think the main assumptions are, bias, stereotypes that exist in the college students that you serve, or maybe in the community around you, maybe even the employees at your community college, your administration, your everyday staff, food service. Think about not only just the students, but your entire population. And then what are the main barriers that you believe someone who experienced food insecurity faces to access a steady supply of nourishing food? And then again, what are you most interested in learning about? All right. I always say this, I think this is the most important slide of the entire PowerPoint, and I'm going to refer back to it. From the core inside me, I believe food is a human right. And there's a bridge. I want you to think of your community college as that bridge between food access and food insecurity. And all of those beams under that bridge are going to make up everyone in your university, maybe even your community partners. And how strong are those pillars? So if you think about this, is your bridge up where people who are experiencing food access cannot get food access, or is it down where they can walk across that bridge with as dignified as we could possibly try to make it for someone? As you know, it's up to that person to decide if there's shame or stigma, or if they feel that it's a safe place for them. It's our goal to try to make it as accessible, equitable, dignified as possible. So we will refer to this bridge being up and down. And I have to tell you, I would love to say that my bridge is always down, but the more I learn about this over the last 13 years, my bridge is not all the way down. And we'll get into that. So when we think about food dignity, there are 3 pillars, and those are the 3 pillars we're going to go through today. One is respect life experiences of everyone around us. The next one is understanding barriers. And then the third one is, how do we lead with strengths? How do we center the people that we're working with? And I want to be very clear that I'm using the verb work, not help. It's really important that we understand that we're working and we're centering the strengths of the person that we're working with. What does success look like for them? I believe, and everyone at Food Dignity believes, that the solutions to end hunger or improve food access really live in the hearts, the minds, the souls of the people that we're working with, the direct service operations. But how many times are we providing the seats at the table for the people that we're either partnering with, who are serving the food, or the people who are consuming the food? And when we can put all 3 of these together, we start to build trust that leads to growth, and then ultimately success for our programs. Okay, so one of the questions, even as I show up today, if I'm doing a podcast or I'm standing on a stage or I'm on the ground handing out food, I always say, what is my lesson today? And I think it's one of the most powerful questions we can ask ourselves when we wake up. So many times I know everything I'm going to speak today I'm going to speak through my lens and my experiences. So I know that in the past, I would always, especially as a dietitian, I don't know if there's any other dietitians here, but I can say that I have been mostly a type A, always trying to prove my opinion, wanting to be right, wanting to save the world through my experience and my education. But the more I've learned from doing the on the ground work is that I don't know it all, and we're not supposed to know it all. And it's our job to take a step back and say, what am I here to learn from the people that are around me? And I do believe that that makes a very strong leader. So I hope that as we go through this presentation, you can ask yourself the same thing. What is my lesson today? So before we dive deep into this, I want to go over some of unconscious biases that we have and how they show up. So confirmation bias. This is when we see information that we seek out. We want to see information that only supports an existing belief. So I'm totally guilty of this. If I'm having an issue with a community partner who might be known as a difficult person, or maybe I'm having a fight with my friend or a family member, I'm going to call family member A who will justify the way I feel. They're going to validate my feelings. They're going to agree with me. They might even make me more mad or um, because I believe more in my point because they gave me that support. It only makes the situation probably worse. Or I can go to friend B and friend B will say, you know what? Did you think of it from this lens? Did you think of it from this example? What if this is the possible solution or their perspective? And how often, just think, you can raise your hand or just think, but how many people go to A? I always go to A, right? Because I feel validated, I feel respected, I feel seen, I feel understood. But how often do we go to B? And so that's one of the things that I think is really important for us to consider is when we're in a situation, can we lean on B to get a different perspective? In group, I saw this all the time when I started volunteering at the food pantry. So this food pantry started back in 1983. When I joined the board 13 years ago as the president, I was the only female and I was, I don't know, I want to say my late 30s. And the average age of the board were men between, I would say, 75 and 85. And so, as someone who's a dietitian, who was a food service director for years with Aramark and school lunch and school food, or school breakfast and summer meal sites, I would have different ideas, different solutions. And when I would bring it to the table, I'm sorry, I'm getting into sunk cost. This is sunk cost. When I would get into the meetings and I would say, we need X, Y, and Z, or can we do X, Y, and Z? They would say, you know what, we've done this way forever. We're not, no, that a walk-in cooler is an accessory. And I'm like, no, it's an asset. Right. So it took me 2 years to actually get a walk-in cooler for the food pantry because of that sunk cost relationship at that with the food bank. So how many times do we see people not wanting to do something new because they're resistant to change? When does this show up at your community college? Will this show up when you're starting to implement the strategies? So we need to be aware of these. In group, I saw a lot at the food pantry too. We were a faith-based organization on the west side of the river. So we had the Susquehanna River and that went right down through a lot of little towns. And I'm north of Philadelphia, 2 hours north of Philadelphia. You might be familiar with our area, Scranton from the Electric City, the TV show, that put us on the roadmap. But there is a river. And so we serve the west side of the river, West Side Food Pantry. And what did we do? We partnered with other churches and I should say church, because it was Christian based. We partnered with people that looked like us, prayed like us, went to school, where our kids went to school. It was a very tight community. We favored people who were similar to us. So that's in-group biased. And then attribution bias is when, say, I might do something today that might upset someone. Am I going to be more forgiving of myself versus if someone did it to me, would I be as forgiving to them? And so I think all of these play a major role in when we think about the strategies that we are going to start implementing and learning about. And it's just something to keep in the the forefront of your mind. So when we talk about the first pillar, and let me just make sure I don't think there's any chats. Okay, so when we start talking about respect life experience, you see I have a sweater here. So respect life of experiences. Every thread in this sweater, let's just say, or what you're wearing, represents your life experience. So where was I born? How many states did I live in? Did I ever move out of the same house that I grew up in? Am I educated? Am I not educated? Where do I pray? Where do I eat? Where do my kids go to school? Do I have kids? Am I married? Just think about all the experience. Who do I follow on social media? All these play a role in how we view the world, how we judge a situation, how we come to assumptions, especially when we see someone making a choice that we would say, you know what, I would never make that choice. I would never make that decision, but we never consider, well, maybe that person doesn't have the same choices that I have, right? I'm totally guilty of this throughout my career. And I didn't really come to terms with it until I started working at the food pantry, and I should say volunteer at. So it was about 13 years ago. I was sitting in my husband's church and they said, we need a food pantry president. And I thought to myself, oh, this is great. I was a food service director. I love to help people. I'm a dietitian. I know how to get food. I know how to give food. I can run this so easily. I'm in. And bonus, it's across the street from my kids' school. So, and they were both going to school full time at that point. And I went home and I remember the board that they really didn't want me to be the president, but they couldn't find a president. And they were trying to bully me out of it. They would say, you can't teach at the University of Scranton and do this. Even though I taught only on Tuesdays and Thursdays, this is 20 hours a week. And I didn't listen. Like I went home and I started thinking to myself, there's 20 hours a week of volunteer service. Do I want to do this? And then that bad voice that started speaking said, you know what, Clancy, it's not your place to judge. Or the bad voice, that was a good voice, sorry. The bad voice started speaking and said, you're going to get upset. You're going to see people who are on welfare, and keep in mind, I'm telling you my misconceptions. It's not, at least to my memory, I don't believe I ever voiced these opinions. I probably could have, but what I'm about to tell you right now is an internal dialogue that I was having with myself. Maybe I had some conversations with my husband in our home, but these are my misconceptions and they're not the truth by any stretch of the imagination, but it's what I thought in that moment was the truth. I thought I would see people using welfare when they should be working. Maybe they were uneducated. Maybe they were lazy. I just had all these judgments. And even worse, I thought to myself, I'm going to see my mom's side of the family. I'm going to see my Uncle Dick, my Aunt Betty. I'm going to see people who are actively using drugs and alcohol. And I thought to myself, my mom spent her whole entire life getting away from that environment. Why would I put my kids right there? And you're probably thinking, wow, that's pretty harsh of my thoughts, but they were my thoughts and it was based off my lived experience. I never set foot in a food pantry, but that's what I assumed hunger was. And thank goodness that voice started speaking and said, it's not your place to judge. Go in and do what you need to do. And if you helped one person, you did the job and walk away. So that's what I did. And when I first started working there, I have to tell you, I never saw my family. I never saw laziness. Actually, this is our food pantry line during COVID. So it's a very small town. This line would wrap around the block and it would go from 1 mile to 2 miles, depending on the day. So people would wait an hour to 2 hours. It is a 2-lane road that would actually turn into 3 lanes. So everyone's pushed over to the side. And that other lane, imagine this, everyone's in line. People, even though it's a small town, this is a busy road. There's buses, there's tractor trailers. So going both ways, very limited space. People are mad because there's a line and they can't get to work on time. So as I'm walking down by those yellow lines, cars might be flying up the other way, screaming, laying on their horn, go get a job. Why are you here? Like just really mean things. But that was our line. That was our food pantry line at our food pantry. We had to go from a choice pantry, which basically means you can come in, pick out what you want based off of your needs, to a drive-through operation. So the other thing, before I get into what I actually saw at the food pantry, I also want to disclose that I call myself a recovering food elitist. And as a dietitian, when I used to do per diem with diabetes management, I used to project my life experience onto people. I made a lot of assumptions. I accepted misconceptions as the truth, and I made judgments. And you're probably thinking, how did you do that? Well, I just assumed when I was thinking about working with my clients, I visualized my car. I visualized myself getting into a car, driving to my grocery store, full service grocery store, having an abundance of food, having enough money. because we talked about meal planning. I just assumed everyone can buy what we talked about for diabetes management. I never once asked about barriers to food access. I didn't even think about it because I was leading from my life experience, the lens that I lived. Um, and I just expected the same, right? And that's where I was wrong. So, how do you define hunger? This is actually a picture of our food drive-through line. So the amount of food that we went through was in 1 month. So the amount of food that we would go through an entire month was gone within 2 hours. But my question to you is, how do you define hunger? I'm a product of the 80s. So what did I grow up seeing, 70s and 80s? I grew up seeing PSAs on TV, Save the Children of Africa. I saw swollen bellies, sunken eyes, skinny limbs. I saw my mom's family in North Carolina. I saw generational poverty through my mom's family, and I saw the TV. So in my mind, this is what I thought hunger was. And many of you, I'm sure you probably understand the definition, but I think it's really important for us to just make sure we are on the same page. But also, I want to give you the tools to be able to explain hunger in ways that other people can explain it, especially when you're trying to convince departments within your own community college, whether you are wanting to strategically collaborate with outside organizations. So the USDA has 4 definitions of food insecurity. We have high and marginal. That means people living in that household have access to enough food to live a healthy and active lifestyle. They are not chronically hungry. Okay, so but I want to talk a little bit about marginal food security, and you'll hear this if you just go to the grocery store right now. What happens with marginal food security, everyone still has access to food to live a healthy and active lifestyle. They're getting the foods that they want to eat. Their eating habits have not changed. But what's happening is that there's stress. They're going to the grocery store and they're thinking, I can't believe how high the grocery prices are. How am I going to be able to maintain this budget, to be able to maintain the diet that we're eating? They start thinking about their stress around if they can afford food. As we go through the severity of food insecurity, what happens is that we have an increased risk of 10 chronic diseases, which is going to impact your students, your staff at your community college. So someone who is marginally food insecure has a higher rate of 10 chronic diseases than someone who's high food secure. So let's talk about the other two. We have low and we have very low food security. I want to go right to very low food security because I think that's what we all think of chronic hunger. I might be skipping a meal today. I might not eat an entire day. I might not eat food the whole 3 days, 4 days. I might have to rely on a food pantry to get my food and other food assistance programs. That's going to be very low food security. Where most people get it wrong with the definition, because we just think of that hunger definition, that very low food security, we need to expand what food insecurity actually means and include the definition of low food security. So in this situation, again, people are considered food insecure, but what's happening is, and I say this all the time, I did not go to Penn State. When I went to Penn State and I survived on instant noodles, that was food insecurity. My belly was full. I was full. I was eating instant noodles day in and day out, but I wasn't getting the nourishment that I needed. I wasn't getting the calcium, the fiber, the vitamin D, the protein. That is low food security. So if you have, I'm sure you have a high rate of single parents in community colleges. We know that. I do work for universities around the country. Maybe mom is diluting her milk, or dad or caregiver. So all children can have milk with their cereal. Maybe mom is diluting the formula. So again, what's happening is we are going to start decreasing the quality of the food that we're eating and increase the quantity. So it was a lot cheaper for me to buy big packs of ramen noodles than other things. It was cheaper for me to buy bread that did not have the extra fiber because it was more expensive. So those are the coping skills we start seeing. But sometimes we we leave out that definition. And I think that's a really important take home message, especially when you're trying to create collaboration or you're working with your teams under you, or within different departments and trying to get them on board with what you want to implement at your community college. So when I went and I started working at the food pantry, the reality is I never saw my aunts, I never saw my uncles. I saw people looking for work. I saw people who were working. In fact, one day a gentleman walked in dressed in a suit. It was a very crisp suit. He was shaven, um, great haircut, right? Everything. And he said, "Is this the food pantry?" What do you think I thought? Like, here's a young white male dressed in a suit walking in, asking if this is the food pantry. I got really excited. And I was like, yes. And he's like, can I speak to the person in charge? And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm even more excited because I know I'm going to get a check. He's going to write me a big check. And now I can like go out and get X, Y, and Z because I had all these dreams and missions or, ideas and goals for this food pantry. And when I told him who I was, he put his head down low and he said, I've been looking for a job for months. I have a wife and children. I cannot go home empty handed. Can you please give me food? And in that moment, I thought, here I am judging someone, projecting what I thought was the truth when at the end of the day, he needed food. So he pulled his car around. We loaded up his trunk and I said, come back anytime. He never came back. About 6 months later, I did get a check in the mail and he said, thank you. You saved me during a difficult time. He got a job and he moved out of the area. So when I started this food pantry, I saw single mothers, I saw children, I saw elderly people slipping through the cracks. I saw students, college students, veterans. And I know that we had veterans because when we went through the drive-through operation, 1 in 4 cars, and I'm 1 in 4, and I'm being conservative there, had a Vietnam either hat or a sticker on the car. And every day I was like, I cannot believe how many times I said, thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. And this is not an inclusive list. This is what I saw at our food pantry. Certainly there are different populations and communities that are at a very higher risk of food insecurity. And I don't want to ignore that. But what I also want you to know is that food insecurity is not going to be as visible as I might have thought at one time in my life, right? Many times when I stand on stage, I say that, and even in this room, there could be many people in this container or in the container of your community college that aren't just your students. Food insecurity lives on every corner. We don't know what's going on in someone's house. We don't know if they have extreme medical bills. That just the diagnosis of diabetes can put someone into food insecurity. And then they're having a hard time managing their chronic disease because now they have out-of-pocket costs. They might have a hard time keeping up with their glucose strip monitoring and all that stuff. So let's go on. The reality is that people are making decisions every single day. All of us make decisions every day around our food choices. Some people have more difficult situations. So you might have college students. Am I going to buy food or am I going to pay for my gas because I have to drive an hour to get to school? In the winter, am I going to have heat or am I going to have books? Am I going to have food? How am I going to pay my rent? Here's a picture that's the food in the background. We have milk, we have whole chickens. And when we went through the drive-through operation, people would give $1 here, $5 here. And we took that money. We never solicited. We never asked for donations. But if someone was going to give us $1, $5 bill, we took it because that was them giving as much as that they were receiving. And it was dignified. At the end of the line, if we ran out of the milk or if we ran out of the chicken, we had the money. And it would always be $10 increments. I would say, here's $10. We ran out of the whole chicken. Go to the grocery store, get whatever you need. On this particular day, I was just down to a $5 bill and three $1 bills. And I thought to myself, "Ugh," and of course it was the ugly money, right? It was ripped, it was wadded. This is a staged picture, but of course I found rip money to show you. It wasn't an even 10. And I thought, I can't give $8 to a person. It's going to be embarrassing. I'm going to cause shame. In this moment, that good voice that brought me to the food pantry said, it's not your place to judge. Give the money. You're creating the shame. You're creating the stigma because of your thoughts right now. Just give her the money and walk away. That's all you have to do. And so I gave her the money. I started walking away and she started crying. And she said, everyone in my house except for my son lost his job. We did not know how he was going to get to work tomorrow. We used our last drop of gas to get here because we needed to eat. You just gave us gas money. And in that moment, I thought, wow, here we go again, projecting what $8 meant to me onto someone else when it meant everything to her. And thinking about that, how could I have created that shame and that stigma? Just with my own thoughts, maybe my own actions, maybe the way I gave it to her, maybe my facial expression, my body language. I don't know. But if I was thinking that, was I, even though I wasn't saying it, was I communicating it? Okay, so oh, I see that there's a comment in the chat. So growing up, I always thought hunger was associated with homelessness. And you know what, I want to comment on that. Sometimes when we think of people who are living in poverty, they are hungry. And I want everyone to understand that there could be people who live in poverty that are not food insecure. And I'm curious if anyone wants to take a guess of why that would be. I don't know if anyone wants to write in the chat, but you can think about that. And then there are people who live in middle class, upper middle class, who are food insecure. And you're probably thinking, well, how could that be? So if we go back to someone living in poverty and not being food insecure because of all the great programs, life experience can also lead to seeing food insecurity as normal. For example, my grandparents diluted their milk. Yep. Saving money. Yep. Right. That was a normal coping mechanism. So someone who living in poverty, they might be on utilizing WIC, women, infant, and children. They might be utilizing SNAP benefits, otherwise known as food stamps. They might be utilizing a food pantry so they have access to food. So they're not food insecure because they are resourceful and they're able to participate in programs that are provided for them. And then someone who is someone who's living in middle class or upper middle class, food insecure, they just don't qualify. And actually, if you go on the Feeding America Network and there's a meal map guide and you can click on the state of Illinois and you're going to see people who live above the threshold. Those are food insecure people in your state, in your county, depending on where you go. And I can show you this if anyone's interested in that, how to access it, but that will give you some data points on how many people live in your county or your state who are not, they are food insecure, but they don't qualify for any food assistance programs. So let's talk about barriers. And I think this is a really important thing for us to be able to understand someone's barriers to food access. The beautiful thing is we don't know what we don't know. And we're not supposed to know everything. And so I think if we can embrace that, that leads us back to what is my lesson today. The good news is that we have an opportunity to learn. And when we can embrace that mindset and take a step back and ask the right questions, we will be able to help get to the solution a lot faster, effectively, and efficiently. So here's, I mean, I'm sure you're all familiar with these. I don't want to get into the big barriers. A lot of people will say, well, I can't control transportation. I can't control someone's medical diagnosis. I can't control where the grocery store is at and what they sell, right? I can't control food costs and inflation because of war and COVID. I can't control institutional racism. All these things you might be thinking of, we do have some control at some level. But what I want to get into is if you have a student who has access to public transportation, do you just check the box and think, well, they have transportation, so that's not a barrier anymore? I'm just curious if anyone feels that way, and think about that, because right now, if someone has access to public transportation, a portion of that could be checked off, but really your barriers are just getting started. I interviewed a gentleman from Cincinnati, and this is where this illustration came from. And he's like, Clancy, in Cincinnati, if I'm going to go 5 miles on the bus, it could take me 2 hours. He's like, taking the bus isn't just taking the bus, as so many people think. And I thought to myself, wow, I never really understood this because it's not my lived experience. And then I worked with a dietitian on trying to get to the why. She had a patient that was only utilizing SNAP and WIC. Or she wasn't utilizing her full benefits of those two programs. And she was constantly buying chips and instant noodles. And she was getting really frustrated. She thought that the person just didn't care about her health, didn't care about her child's health, didn't want to work with this patient, very resentful of this person, right? Because she's making all these assumptions based off of the choices she was making. And I said to her, why don't we try to get to the why? Like what else is going on? And when she finally got to the why, she came back and she said, I'm glad I took a step back because I found out she's a single mom and she has to take 2 buses to get to the grocery store. So it's a very long trip. She has a lot of planning to do for 2 bus routes. Then when she gets to the grocery store, she has to cross a very busy road. Her number one priority is the safety of her son. They cross the busy road. Now she has to shop. Her number one priority for shopping, or the types of food she would get, is that the food would be lightweight. Chips, instant noodles. Because she had to be able to carry this food, control, protect. She had a young son that liked to dart out. I am a mother of 2 kids. I can say both like to run and dart out. Maybe my son more times than my daughter, right? But her number one thing, she has to be able to carry him, hold him, manage him. Then when she gets on the bus, he has a seat, she has a seat. There's not a seat for the food. Maybe she could put stuff underneath, maybe she could put stuff on top, but she could only buy what she could carry and what she could put on the bus with her. So imagine someone living with food insecurity, all these demands, trying to go to a community college, they're taking the bus. You put all this planning and all this effort just to get from point A to point B that could have taken, depending on where you are in Illinois, if you're in Chicago, I don't know, but depending on where you are, the bus system might be longer to go short distances. Either way, it's not getting into your car whenever you feel like it, going to any grocery store that you want, and having the ability to put as many groceries in the back of in your trunk, the back seat, even if you're ride sharing with someone. So we need to understand that there's a lot of challenges within these barriers. I want to share this one with you. So at the Food Dignity Movement, what we do now is we really work with organizations that want to create system and policy change to improve food access. And when we do this, we conduct a lot of focus groups, surveys, and this is a VOTEC school. And I do want to include this. I know this isn't your population, but these are students who would be coming into your community college, maybe, unless they go off to a trade school, right? This could be a potential customer or student of you. So we're at VOTEC school. And what we decided to do was there's 300 students. We had 10 focus groups of 30 students. Every student that was there that day went through a focus group. And we did not say we were going to fight hunger. We already know this population, just like community colleges, are at very high risk of food insecurity. Instead, we talked about environmental sustainability. We led with their strengths. This generation loves to save the planet. Many other generations do too. But we knew this was a strength. We knew this was important to them. So we basically led in saying, hey, if we can get a pallet of Kraft macaroni and cheese and save it from a landfill, it's perfectly edible, it's perfectly safe. The problem is that they went to deliver it to a big box store, and the big box store refused it because 2 cases out of 50 were damaged. That trucking company cannot take the food back to the warehouse. That trucking company has 2 choices: landfill fee or tax deduction to help to a nonprofit or to a food bank and take it to them. So I said to them, if I can get you a pallet, and I was making assumptions that this population would love macaroni and cheese, right? Because it was something I loved, but that was the example that I gave, and it's something my kids love. And they're the ones that started saying, we have people who are hungry. The only time they eat is at school, and it's the lunch. They take the breakfast home. If they have the breakfast, they eat it. At that point, they had a grab and go breakfast at the end of the day. It wasn't in the morning. So it was like they were supposed to eat that in the morning of the next day before they came in. And they said they eat the breakfast on the bus going home. And that's then they come back and they don't eat again until lunch. We need to have a food pantry. They're the ones that brought up the idea of the food pantry. Now, that was what I was hoping, obviously. And I had a certain strategy. I had an idea of where it would be, the timing, after interviewing staff and administration. And then the students, completely different program, completely different location, different timing. And now we had, I think, I don't know, it was somewhere between 10 and 20 volunteers, students that run the pantry now. But the problem that happened, and this is a major barrier in the Feeding America Network, if you're working with government food, we call it TFAP. That's the Emergency Food Assistant Program. There's a declaration of need form that they have to do. So it's your name, your address, circle the income of your household, hand it in. After the focus group, guidance counselors started handing these forms out because obviously we needed to source food other than what we were rescuing. And we wanted to partner with our local Feeding America food bank. These students started saying, we're not going to fill out this form. We're not filling it out. And when the guidance counselors, why? It's a simple form. No one really looks at it. It's going to go on a desk. It's just formality. And the student said, because it's going to alert the officials that there's no food in my home, and they're going to take us away with children and youth. That one had me really sad for 2 weeks. These are students that are coming to you that might have this fear, and that's a barrier. There's nothing we can do about this barrier except I do. I talk about it all the time, and I hope that there's change. Because why would this population in particularly that was 100% free, reduced, on provision 2, everyone got a free lunch and free breakfast way before COVID. How many times do we have to ask someone if they're hungry before we help them? We ended up partnering with an independent food bank, Midwest Food Bank. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they're actually from somewhere out here, but they have a warehouse in Pennsylvania, and it's all really corporate food donations. There's no government program, no government food, so we don't have to do the self-declaration of need. So we're still able to meet the students' need. We just had to take a different approach based off of this barrier. Now, if this is not an option for you, then how do we change the communication around the TFAP form? How do we give peace of mind? Can we ever make this TFAP form safe for certain populations? If you have a high immigration population, my experience, we have a high Mexican population in our town in Hazleton, a lot of immigration from Mexico. When this form comes out, when I was at the food pantry, people disappeared and we didn't see them for a long time. until they were afraid of deportation. They were afraid of something. So we need to understand what the language is. How do we try to make this as safe as possible? If it's something that we have to, it's a compliance with Feeding America, you're going to have to use it. But then what's the language that we can use to help put people at ease as best as we can? Here is this is actually a nursing student in the maroon. One of the things I love doing is I work with a lot of colleges in trying to get their students involved to really be the leaders and running the organization. And so we had a nursing student and what's really unique about our area, Northeastern Pennsylvania, we have one community college, Luzerne County Community College, but we also have 3 Penn State campuses, University of Scranton, Misericordia, Johnson, Keystone, Geisinger Medical School. We are loaded with a lot of universities. So my experience with working with colleges is pretty vast. And I take a lot of students, interns as well. And so this nursing student was working with me, and this particular college did not want the food access to be in the public domain of the school. They wanted it, and in fact, they had it in the VP's of student affairs office. And in my mind, I'm like, when I was at school, it was very intimidating to go talk to my professor, let alone if I was hungry and desperate for food, would I go to a VP of student affairs office and ask for food? I don't know. I was never in that position. But I think it's a good question to ask. And I remember talking to this university saying, well, we should really put the food right where everyone can see it and give it out. And they said, no, that's going to create shame. That's embarrassing. And I went back and I said, actually, we're creating the shame. How are we marketing it? Are we saying we're fighting hunger? Are you projecting that onto people? We know this is a high rate of food insecurity. Why can't we just say, we have produce, we care about you, we care about the environment, let's share food and let's give it out? They did not like that idea. But I had a student then that was like, let's do that. And so it became her student project. And she set it up in the Union building where they were serving lunch. The line was super long. People were crowding around. Everyone wanted the food, but we never said we were fighting hunger, right? We knew it was a high risk population. So again, why do we have to say that? How can we market this more as an environmental piece of sustainability, which, by the way, we can get into the next meeting. That's a great way to write grants for funding for this versus fighting hunger. So we need to really rethink about how we're doing this and what we're saying. And so she started doing this every 2 weeks at this university. They loved it. She loved it. The nursing students loved it. And then at that point, this is a long time ago, before food as medicine became like trendy, although dietitians have been doing food as medicine for years. It just was never called that. But this was a nurse now that has some experience in that concept and can relate to that experience to a food as medicine concept, actually giving her resume. This was a system change that she did. It was a program that she implemented. Think about the resume building this student was able to gain and learn about her profession all at the same time. So I want you to meet Maria. So in Northeastern Pennsylvania, we have Misericordia University. So the single moms get a 4-year education. They get free housing. That's what the free housing's key. And it's actually a house. So there's bedrooms, there's a full kitchen, living room. They don't have to leave. They get to stay there 365 days out of the year. They don't have to go home for summer. They live there. They do get some reimbursement or scholarships for their tuition, but they get a lot of support from parenting. Maybe if someone comes in and needs some kind of eye surgery, or maybe they have mouth pain and they need a tooth extracted, they get them those services. They get them the glasses so they can see. They get them nutrition counseling, mental health counseling, and it's a program where they're seeing the kiddos that went through with their moms have all been either placed in a trade school, military, or college. So they're breaking the cycle of poverty two generations at a time through this program. Maria was one of the women that went through this program. And so what happens when I'm on stage and I'm talking, everyone wants us to come and train, especially WIC agencies. So they're smaller and I can't get to every WIC agency. So we're like, let's start something called the Food Dignity Institute, where professors can use it to teach about food insecurity in their classrooms. If you wanted to do sensitivity training, you could do that too. It's free. We're a nonprofit. But before we launched this program, really, we were in the thought process, the think tank. We had our outline. We had all these great ideas. I said, Maria, can you please look at this? You do DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion at NYU. Can you please look at this and tell us where we're wrong so we can be right? And she had it for a couple of weeks and she gave it back and there was a lot of red. There was a lot of red ink. And I couldn't get past her first question. Keep in mind, well, I'm just gonna be straight out honest. Like, this was my ego. My ego was like through, whoo. Her first question was, where do you create the barriers? And when I first read it, I was like, doesn't she understand? We have lines around the block with COVID and we're feeding all these people. At that point, we were, I think, around the 2 million meal mark. And she's asking about where I create the barriers. I couldn't get past that. I could not, I had to put it away, walk away, come back, read it, put it away, come back, read it. And eventually, a couple weeks, I got it. I digested it and I listened and I was willing to be wrong, but I did have to go through an ego trip to get there. And I remember thinking to myself, I do create barriers. At the food pantry, what was our hours of operation? Yes, there were all these stipulations. Remember that there's 2 schools on that street too. So I shouldn't get into my excuses, but we were only able to be open at a certain time. So and it was during the day. We weren't available to the working poor. Every time I project my food philosophy, or every time I project what $8 is, every time I make a judgment or I have a misconceptions, which happens still, I'm sure I'm going to go out today and judge. We all judge. It's when do we notice that we're judging and take a step back and say, okay, what's my lesson? Where am I wrong so I can be right? Am I judging? Is this a misconception? Is this just a perception? We need to start asking. This is like a practice that you have to do every minute of every day. And we're going to fail miserably. It's not something you just put in a book and, okay, I did that and I'm good. So every time I project that food philosophy, where's my bridge? It's up. It's not down. That's why I said earlier, I don't know if my bridge will always be 100% down, because sometimes I might not even understand when I'm projecting or judging or leading from a misconception, because we don't know what we don't know, but we need to take the time to learn about that. The other thing that I learned is that we were fighting classism, not food dignity or institutional racism or food inequity, food injustice. Because when we were at the food pantry, we were working with everyone that prayed like us and looked like us, right? So we predominantly all white people that we fed. We were fighting classism. We were helping the white population get food, be food insecure, so they could pay their rent, they could pay for their gas to get to work. We weren't the bridge. Our bridge was so like this, because we weren't open to anyone from the community could come, but we weren't promoting, we didn't go out of our way to be inclusive. Let's just put it that way. And then the other thing is this a charity? Do we have the charitable mindset or do we have a human right mindset? And I could go down a long list of examples of this, but think about it from a standpoint of people should be grateful for the food that they get because it's free. That is a charitable mindset. Because we do a lot with food councils across the nation, we do a lot with departments of health trying to improve access to food. I have been told, here's just one little story. There's a food pantry in, I won't even get to where it's at, but there's a food pantry in the Midwest that serves a predominantly Muslim population, but the food bank is constantly sending pork. And they would say, we're not going to eat this. We're not going to serve it. And the food bank is saying, you should be thankful. It's free. This is food. People can eat it. Pork is expensive. And right now it's really hard to get protein products through the commodity system. Unfortunately, it is right now. So when are we acting from a point of what do people want to eat? Can we just ask, what do you want to eat versus saying you get what you get and you don't get upset mentality? So yes, I think that there's a place for charity. I've been there for 13 years in the faith-based organization, but now I've also seen where there's gaps. I've worked in food as medicine with a major health plan. I've seen where the charity versus the human right aspect plays a role. And I've done this at the college and WIC as well. So it does, this mentality can play across different sectors. And I love this podcast episode. I think you should look, his name's Dan. Unfortunately, everyone's face is over his name, but he does work at a university in, I think, New Jersey. You might want to listen to his podcast. Very insightful. So let's talk about leading with strengths and what does that mean? So here's our pyramid. This is how do we level inclusion? We picked leveling inclusion because I didn't like the terminology leveling up and leveling down. I think we've heard a lot of this in leadership. So we're saying level inclusion. So when we think about empowerment, empowerment should be at the base. Are we empowering ourselves to say, you know what, I could take a step back and learn something right now. I don't have all the answers. Yes, I have an education. And I always say, I put my degree and my credentials in a box and I lock it and I put it away. And I try to come with that learning mindset. So can I empower myself to do that every day? That's a level of empowerment. Can I empower the people around me to have a better understanding of what food insecurity is? And can I empower them to have the voice to say, hey, Clancy, I disagree with you, and this is why. And I'm talking about my staff, right? Can I empower that brave space for people to be able to call me out or question me? And we do that all the time, and I think it's great. Another level of empowerment is empowering your students, your staff, who are going to be hopefully the leaders in any strategy that you implement. Their voice is critical. Their voice must be at the table. So one, can we empower them to speak up, which might be difficult because it has to be a trusting, compassionate, brave space as much as we can make it. How do we empower people to use their voice for change? And all in this, there's going to be a lot of mixed emotions, right? It was really hard for me to get up on stage one time and empower myself to say, I have a lot of misconceptions and this is where I'm wrong. There was a lot of internal emotions, and it's scary to put yourself out there, right? So we need to understand what's going on. Can we recognize when someone might have a reaction and might not feel comfortable in that moment? Then how do we change that communication so we can ease those internal reflections, those emotions? And then that strategic communication leads those people, everyone, including ourselves, into action. And so that's really when we're centering people, and we're also centering ourselves, we're centering everyone around us. And my question to you is, are we asking the right questions? Yes, there's this 2 screening validations tool. You can look up any type of screening. Those are important. I think it's important to understand the food insecurity rates on your campus. That's great. I think it helps with data collection and getting your grants, but I want to go deeper with the questions that maybe we're asking. And so for us, it's really important to have focus groups and surveys. That's why we did a pre-survey, and you're going to do a post-survey. I'm always going to ask for feedback. When we get students, we have this document. It's actually a food dignity bank of questions, screening questions. It's not a document that you would just hand over to anyone to answer. We work with students and say, hey, this is your outcome. of whatever project or whatever internship or what's the other one that students do? Service learning. Pick 3 questions. Pick 3. That's it. It's going to be tough. Spend time with this document. And then you're going to survey people. And then you're going to find out what they want, what they need. And then we might have to ask more questions. And then we're going to have a focus group where we sit down and we talk to people. How do we include them in the decision-making process like we did with the VOTEC students, right? Like we had our one idea of what would happen and we came out at the other end completely different. So it's really important that you ask a lot of questions, have a lot of focus groups, but you can download this for free. We have a resource section on the Food Dignity Movement website, and you could get this food bank question. Here's just an example of one of the students. She was a dietetic intern she was from Penn State, doing the survey and having conversations. And we did this with a busy food line, right? Like that was really tough. You have a really unique audience because they're not going anywhere except in the summer, maybe not even in the summer. So if we could do this at a food line, I've done this, a food distribution line at a food pantry with 700 cards coming through cars, you can do it. I've interviewed people from the stage. I screen people for food insecurity, especially when I know I have a lot of students and dietitians. And then I give that feedback right back to that program because they learn that their nutrition students are food insecure and we're a nutrition program. So what are we doing to teach the students about improving food access for themselves through system and policy change at that? And this was Marywood University, and they embraced it, and we did some work together. So getting students involved is probably one of the best things you could ever do. Here's an example that I want to share with you of getting to the why and really understanding and asking the right questions. And this was a college student through the Misericordia program, the Women's with Children's program, and she was constantly drinking soda. And I could, as someone who is a dietitian, and I'm actually here speaking tomorrow at the Dairy Alliance Sustainable Conference in Chicago, I love my milk. So I could keep saying, drink milk, not soda, drink milk, drink water, not soda. You know the drill. You know that story that a typical dietitian, myself would say. And this one student, when I finally got down to the why, because the soda was never going to go away and it was clear. And I said to her, she said to me, she said, I drink soda because the carbonation combined with sugar gives a sense of fullness. So I can put my kid to bed with a full belly. The feeling of fullness. That was her why. Now, as an educator or someone who's doing policy and system change, it's really important to understand that coping mechanisms, that choice, and the reason behind that choice. So it completely changes the conversation that you're having with the person. And this story was not just one time. This pops up time and time again. I say it on stages, especially at WIC and SNAP conferences. And I've had SNAP educators and WIC educators come up and saying, I've done that. I did it last month because I'm food insecure myself. And this is a working professional that teaches nutrition education. But because that soda gives the feeling of fullness, that is what was important. So think about that from a sustainability aspect. And if you have students that are doing this, how is that impacting their grades? How does that impact them showing up? How does that impact your retention of your students? Okay, so engaging conversation starters. You can download this. This is when you're on like a one-on-one. This might be a tool that someone can use that's working with a student or in any program, but I just want to highlight it. The idea of asking the right questions is we need to normalize what's happening. We need to make it relevant, and we can hopefully create a space where people feel comfortable enough to share. So here, I'm going to give you real quick 3 fast examples. I'm going to ask you, how many people have can openers that don't work, or they work one day and they might not work another day? Every time I ask this from stage, I would say 80% of the hands go up. I just normalized kitchen equipment not working, right? We all deal with that. So how do you phrase questions that center this as everyone's problem and not just what's wrong with you or what's wrong with your kitchen equipment? You're the one with the poor kitchen equipment. No, we all have struggles, right? So how do we have that conversation? Another one is, how do we make it relevant? Well, COVID has impacted gas prices, especially in Pennsylvania. It's impacted inflation with groceries. The war in Ukraine impacted inflation. So how has this impacted how you shop? Again, I made it relevant. Safe, I need to switch that word out to brave. I was told, and I forgot this slide. So again, what's my lesson today? I was told that that word needs to go. A microwave. So someone, most of the time, I'm going to guess, and this is me making an assumption, but a microwave is probably a very popular way for your students to cook. I could be completely wrong, but you won't know that unless you do a survey. So I can tell you, at the food pantry, many people used a microwave. That's all they had. And I recently just spoke to a dietetic group, and a lady raised her hand and she's like, Clancy, I have this one patient. He just wants to cook in the microwave, and I've taken him shopping and I show him what he could cook on his stove. And in her mind, success for him was learning to cook a different way. And I had to say to her in private, not from the stage, why is it so important to you that he does not cook with a microwave? If that is what success is for him, who are you to take that away, right? So many times I will say, hey, I love to use the microwave. My son has autonomy. He can open up his green beans, his canned green beans with the flip top, pour the juice or the liquid out, and then pop it in the microwave in a bowl. Love it. Gives me peace of mind, gives him the ability to cook something on his own as, I don't know, how old is he, 12? What are your favorite ways to cook? So we're asking people about what they like to do, what they want to do. It's a completely different switch of the narrative. Again, not what's wrong with you or what's not working, or, so many times we go to the negative. Why can't we crowdsource or pull out the resources and what's working well? So again, you can download engaging conversation starters. Those are just 3 examples. There's so many different categories that are available for you. I want to talk, we have about 20 minutes left, and I do want to leave time for any questions. I do want to talk about collaboration. I think this is really important, especially at your level, well, at any level. I look at collaboration 4-pronged. So that would be collaboration within your own self. So I'm going to collaborate. I'm going to make an agreement that I'm going to take a step back and say, where am I wrong so I can be right? Or how do I collaborate with another individual, whether it's someone we're working with to improve food access, or maybe it's someone we're collaborating with to change their mindset to get policy and system changed. Maybe the collaboration is internal, so it's your departments working together, or it's external where we're working with a community partner. So communication strategy, depending on who you're trying to collaborate with, is going to be completely different, especially when we start to get into working. We can dive deeper into this in the second series, depending on what your post survey says. But I'm going to use this as an example. If I'm working with someone from a different industry, so let's say your community college wants to partner with a corporation. Maybe there's a business down the road that a lot of people are working at that also attend classes. And this is something, we have a lot of warehousing, warehouses, very industrial where we live, right next to LCCR community colleges. So a lot of people, they now have Head Start on site at the community college, and they provide transportation back and forth to the warehouses, to the community college. We know that if we're going to partner, they might want to partner with, who's out there, Chewy, the dog, the plant company, right? That's just one of them. Patagonia, there's a whole list. But if they know there's a high population of their students working there, they might want to say, okay, how do we collaborate? How do we figure out to improve food access? If I'm not going to go, if I'm a community college, I'm not going to go to that corporation and say, college kids are hungry, blah, blah, blah. I'm not even talking about hunger, not even going to mention hunger. Instead, I'm going to talk about what's important to that organization. So what do they care about? Rising healthcare costs. They care about utilization rates of their healthcare bills, right? Every month. What are they paying? What are the premiums that they're paying? They care about brand loyalty. They care about employee morale. They want people to show up. They care about productivity, absenteeism. All the if someone's sick at work because they're food insecure and they have a chronic disease, guess what? They're going to be less productive. They might be sick more often. They might be taking their kids to the doctor more often. So if we can say how food access actually improves those 4 things that are listed on there, plus many more, that company will be like, maybe we should be partnering. What, let's talk about this, right? It's all about how we frame it based off of the values. So communication strategy is really key. And I think this is one thing that you need to think about as we go through to the next series. And especially if you want to bring someone or you want to talk about how to improve collaboration, this is the mindset that we would brainstorm and how you would work with them. So stakeholder mapping, really super important. It's an easy activity. You could Google how to do it. This is a very high level of stakeholder mapping. I could spend a full day, a half a day with just one organization figuring this out. So when we do stakeholder mapping, we look at who has influence and who has interest in our program and what we want to do. So if we look at the quadrants, we have high influence, high interest, right? That would be, depending on who that would be. So for me, I would say Feeding America has a high influence. They have a lot of food and they probably have a high interest because they want to end hunger. So I would probably put them as a stakeholder in that quadrant. However, maybe I have a food bank that has a high influence, but maybe not a much of an interest. I could actually be in a situation where maybe I'll put them over there. It depends on the culture of that organization, independent or any food bank, right? I really want to concentrate on those 2 quadrants just based off of time, because they're the most important. How many times do we have partners that have a high influence and high interest, but we don't put a lot of time and energy into them because we think, well, that's just easy. They're interested. I don't need to sell them. They've been sold. And instead, we put all of our time into the low interest, high influence, because the low interest, we want to constantly prove that they need to be interested. This is like where we start to get more into an ego trip, or at least that's my experience. And what happens is, what we really want to concentrate on is partner B, high influence, high interest. The more we can promote and grow with that partner and those stakeholders, then partner A with the low interest might be saying, what are they doing? Why am I not doing that? Why didn't I get my picture in the paper? Why am I not listed on their website? Right? Like the interest starts peaking, and then they come over to the high influence, high interest. When you do stakeholder mapping, your stakeholders are everyone and anyone who has an influence on your programs. So it could be your public transportation. It could be, well, I'm in windy Chicago. It could be wind, right? It could be bad weather. It could be trash removal. So think about, when you think about stakeholders, it must be non-human and human. And it would be anyone and everyone who has an impact. And you could sit down and make a whole list. And be careful who's in the room when you're doing this, because there's some people in your organization you might actually put in a quadrant that they might not want to be or be known to be in, but you have to have honest conversations. Anyways, so that's a high level of stakeholder mapping, but it's really important that you identify those high influence, high interest people and rethink about how you can grow that partnership. If you spend your time with partner B, you become a hamster on a wheel. And I did that for over 10 years. And it took me severing a relationship, believe it or not, with a food bank so I could fight hunger, because I had so much energy and emotion and mental just trying to get them to partner and be creative and be open to different changes, and it wasn't going anywhere, and it was just consuming me. And the moment that I ended that relationship and I focused on partner A, everything fell into place and it became a lot easier, and we've grown a lot more. So super important. The other thing is, always keep in mind that dignity may look different than you expect. What you might think is dignified, someone might find it offensive. And we need to be open to that. We don't really have a definition of food dignity. We believe that to be a movement, we have to be fluid and flexible. And we also recognize that food dignity can be defined differently by every single person in this webinar. So even when you're filling out your form and giving us any type of feedback, please, I would love to know what food dignity means to you. So real quick, I want you to reflect on what your biggest aha or your biggest takeaway, because that's probably the best place to start with creating change around anything that you want to implement. And then we can work on the strategy to get there. So what you can do is take your biggest takeaway, turn it into a goal, right? I think we all know how to do this. We're all leaders. And then you list 1 to 3 action items to reach that goal, and you start making slow progress. So resources, again, fooddignitymovement.org, again, the Institute, you're welcome. It's like there's modules. We did a pre-survey of people who wanted it to find out what they wanted. So it's really a lot of short videos, participatory learning. It's nothing long like this. And it's broken down into a lot of different segments, so to speak, but professors use it all the time to teach their students. It was peer reviewed as well, and that's free. And then we have the Food Dignity Challenge. If you wanted to take that, it's just a fun little thing that you can get people doing at your campus, or it just gets people to think differently. And it's once a week for 8 weeks. You just get an email drop, and it might be me talking for 5 minutes with just something for you to think about doing differently that would be in your normal day routine, right? Just trying to change that perspective. So your action steps, I see that the post survey was listed. So if you could open that up, please take that as soon as possible. There is a ranking of different things that we could put in as the roadmap. Remember, we want strategy at the end of this, and I want to create a roadmap for you to be able to follow with simple actions that will be doable, replicable, and scalable, to lead us onto the right path. And you need to fill that out. I would love to know what your lesson is today, that aha. And certainly if you could take the Hidden Hunger Challenge, up to you. It's just something fun. So with that, 11:50, I know you wanted 10 minutes for questions. I would love to hear from anyone and everyone.